The Ole Miss Rebels are coming off a pinnacle year, going into year 3 under Lane Kiffin. Last season, they went 10-3, losing to Baylor 21-7 in the Sugar Bowl. They went 6-2 in SEC play. And going into the 2022 college football season, how good is Ole Miss football going to be? Their over-under win total right now is at 7.5. This is a team that lost a lot of talent on the offensive side of the football. They lost their 3 best wide receivers in Dartario Drummond, Braylon Sanders, and they also lost Pearson as well. But they do have some pretty good talent that they're going to be replacing those guys with. You have Jonathan Mingo, who probably is their best returning receiver from last year. He had 22 catches for 346 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. He probably could have put up even better numbers if he was able to stay healthy. I believe he only played half of the season due to injuries. And if he's able to stay fully healthy this year, he could end up being one of the better wide receivers in the SEC this season. You have Jalen Knox, who is a transfer from Missouri. He didn't play last year. He was forced to sit out, but over his career with Missouri, he caught 77 receptions for 1,031 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. They also recently landed UCF transfer wide receiver Jalen Robinson, who was highly touted from the transfer portal. At the time he had committed to Ole Miss a month ago, he was the 4th ranked wide receiver out of the transfer portal. He was limited in his production last year for UCF because of injuries. He only had 18 receptions, 2 touchdowns, and 322 receiving yards. But the year prior in 2020, he was one of the better players in the American Athletic Conference in 2020. 55 receptions for 979 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. This guy is an explosive wide receiver. He can make a lot of acrobatic catches. I think he's going to end up being a plug-and-play guy right away for Ole Miss, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up becoming the best wide receiver on this team. You also have Jordan Watkins, who transferred near the end of the season, I believe, he transferred from Louisiana. He had a pretty productive year for the Cardinals last year. So the wide receiving core, although they are losing a good amount of talent, you had guys who transferred out, some who departed for the NFL. I don't think that the wide receiver position should see a extreme drop-off in production. However, where could this offense be better at? They could be more efficient on 3rd down because last year they only converted on 3rd down 38.20% of the time, which was 74th in college football. And the red zone offense wasn't good neither. It was 104th in that department as well. So they have to get better in those areas. Also, we don't really know who's going to be the starting quarterback. So you got Jaxson Dart, transfer from USC, and we thought, well, many of us thought, myself included, that this was just going to be his job and it wasn't really going to be any discussion about it. Well, according to a lot of people in the Ole Miss world who followed this program way more than I do, Jaxson Dart and Luke Altmyer right now are neck and neck when it comes to the quarterback competition. And right now, many fans are saying that Luke Altmyer has the edge. He had a better spring game. They said that the thing with Jaxson Dart is the fact that Jaxson Dart was a little bit too aggressive in a sense. He was taking unnecessary risks. He wasn't smart with the football. However, he was pushing the football downfield. Meanwhile, you had Luke Altmyer, who was kind of taking the conservative approach, taking what the defense gives him, taking the checkdowns. However, he wasn't really pushing the football downfield as much as you would like him to. And in Lane Kiffin's offense, if you're going to find a great replacement for Matt Corral, you have to find a quarterback who's willing to take shots downfield or who's willing to push the issue sometimes. However, you also don't want to start a guy who's going to come in and be a turnover machine, because the key to playing the quarterback position is being able to limit the amount of turnovers while also being able to throw the football at a really high level. So this is still going to be a quarterback competition that's going to come down to the wire. We're not going to get an answer who's going to be the full-time starting quarterback come week 1, pretty much, it seems like. But if Jaxson Dart can end up figuring things out come fall camp, I still expect him to get the starting job. I think the thing with him is that Luke Altmyer already had a little bit of a leg up on him because he already was in the system, already was a little bit more familiar with the offense. And the thing with him is that it really has just been his aggressiveness, trying to be a little bit more decisive when it comes to picking when to take risk and when not to take risk. So either way, I think that whoever starts, I think that there's going to be some struggles at times, and they may still end up rotating in these quarterbacks until they figure out who becomes that guy. But I'm still putting my money on Jaxson Dart. I'm a little bit disappointed that we still have to wait for him to cement himself. Same thing with Jaden Daniels at LSU. But you got to remember, these quarterback competitions, sometimes these coaches know who the better guy is, but sometimes they'll hype up the lesser guy to make the projected starter perform a little bit better, to be a little bit more motivated. You look at running back, you have Useless Bentley, who is a transfer from SMU, really shifty, had 96 carries for 610 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, and average 7.4 yards per carry. Then you have running back Zach Evans from TCU. I think that he's going to end up becoming the second best running back in the SEC this year behind Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's going to be one of the more impactful transfers in college football this year. And I think that he's going to have a big role in this Ole Miss offense. And as long as he can stay healthy, he should put up some really great numbers. That really has been the downfall with Zach Evans. If you go back and you look at his time with the Horned Frogs at TCU, this is somebody who, remind you, was averaging 7 yards per carry, not just last year, but his freshman year as well. So that pretty much means that every time he carried the football, he averaged the first down every 2 carries. That's phenomenal. So I also think that he's going to be heavily involved in the passing game because he has really good hands. And a lot of people have gave him Alvin Kamara comparisons, and I definitely understand those comparisons. I see it. I see the acceleration, the ability to change the corner without sacrificing speed. He also has pretty smooth hands as well. So hopefully he can stay healthy and we can see a little bit more of what he can do in the passing game. Then the offensive line, I don't think the offensive line is that big of a concern. They do have some pretty solid pieces there. They also brought in a couple of transfers there. So I think the offensive line should still be pretty decent. The defense, last year, mixed reviews from people. Some people said it wasn't all that great. Some people said it was pretty solid. Me, I think that the defense was okay. The defense had a bend but don't break mentality. And when you have an offense that is as good as what Ole Miss had last year, and you average a lot of plays on offense, that means that your defense is probably going to be on the field a lot more. So it's really kind of hard to judge how good a team like Ole Miss defense is going to be when their offense is kind of fast-paced, and they do put the defense on the field a lot because they score so fast. But with the defense having a bend but don't break mentality, what I mean by that is that even though they gave up a lot of yards, they didn't give up a lot of points. And that held true because they was 94th in college football in yards per game allowed, but they were in the middle of the pack in the country when it came to points per game allowed, only allowing 25.3. The biggest concern probably is going to be, will the run defense improve? Because the run defense was allowing almost 200 yards per game. So you bring in Central Michigan transfer Troy Brown. This is somebody who is really, really good. He is a 3-time All-MAC player. Last year, he had a phenomenal season for the Chippewas. 65 tackles, 6 pass deflections, an interception, and a fumble recovery. He's definitely going to help out on improving that run defense this year. When it comes to your pass rush, Cedric Johnson is somebody who I think could end up having double-digit sacks this year. He had 6.5 sacks last season. I really love their secondary. DeAndre Price had a really solid season for the Rebels last year. AJ Finley was somebody who did it all for Ole Miss on defense. He was third on the team in tackles with 90. He also led the team in interceptions. He also had 4 pass breakups. So overall, when I'm looking at this Ole Miss team, I definitely think that they're not going to have the season that they had last year. I would be incredibly shocked if they ended up winning 10 games again this season. I think that they're probably going to be around 7 wins. Even though their first couple of games on the schedule are pretty easy. They're pretty much as close as what you get to guaranteed victories. You play Troy, which you can't overlook Troy. We already know what Troy does. Troy, I still think they should be able to handle business there. You play Central Arkansas. You got to go on the road and play Georgia Tech. I think they should win that game, but I definitely think that depending on the kind of Georgia Tech team that we get this year, it could be a game that could end up being a little bit of a dogfight for Ole Miss. And I'm not saying Georgia Tech is going to be great. I'm saying that Georgia Tech is kind of one of those teams that you have to give the boom or bust label. They're a team that they could end up booming and being a really good football team this year, or they could be a team that busts, end up firing their head coach, and then having to make a lot of different changes on their coaching staff. So I don't really know what to think about Georgia Tech, but I think at the moment that probably would be a W. 3-0 there. You play Tulsa. That should also be a pretty easy victory for you there. So you should go into your first conference game 4-0. Then you have to play Kentucky. Kentucky is supposed to be one of the best teams in the SEC this year, especially in the SEC East. Many people think that the second best team on that side of the conference is either going to come down to either Tennessee or Kentucky. However, Kentucky is also a team that is replacing a lot of production that left for the NFL last year. So they're still trying to get some pieces to come along there. I think that's a game that could go either way. You got to play Vanderbilt. So you have 5 wins there. Auburn is a really intriguing team because on paper, they don't look all that good. But when you play them on the field, this is a team that definitely is really solid when it comes to elevating their level of play in big games. They did it so many times last year, and it's happened so many times in the past. Going on the road to face LSU is probably going to be one of the biggest games this year for Ole Miss, in my opinion, because LSU is a team that you're going into year one under Brian Kelly, and you don't really know what to expect. Then, like Georgia Tech, I think that LSU is also a team that you can put in that boom or bust category, because if they end up playing very well, because they did hit the transfer portal really hard, same thing that Ole Miss did, and everybody ends up working out and the offensive line comes along, LSU could be one of the best teams in the SEC this year. However, they also could end up not being all that great and being an average team at best. So don't really know how that game goes. Then you have to go on the road again before your bye week, before you play Alabama. You have to face Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a team that has a lot of talent, especially on the defense side of the ball and up front. But I think that Ole Miss by this point should have their quarterback situation settled, and everybody should start clicking at a pretty high level. So I think that this is where you're going to start seeing Ole Miss play some of their best football at this time of the season. You play Alabama, then you got to play on the road at Arkansas, Mississippi State. That is a really brutal last 4 games of the season, especially when you have your last 3 coming off that bye, Alabama, on the road at Arkansas. And we all remember how that Arkansas game went last year. And then you got to play Mississippi State. I think that Mississippi State is probably a better team than Ole Miss this year. And the reason why I say that is because they have so much talent on the offensive line. Well, on the defensive line, their defensive line probably could be one of the top 10 best in college football this year. They have a lot of talent on defense, and also their offensive line should be pretty good as well this year. The question with Mississippi State really comes down to how much are they going to get out of their wide receiver position. So I think if you're looking at Ole Miss, I definitely think that this is a team that probably will win 7 games. They're definitely going to take a step back. I would be shocked if this team ends up winning 10 games. Heck, even if they are able to win 9 games, I would be kind of surprised. So my record prediction for Ole Miss is probably going to be 7 games. I think they're going to have some games where they end up upsetting some teams, but they're also going to have a couple of losses against some of the better teams this year. I think Arkansas is going to be one of those teams, and I already said that I think Mississippi State could surprise a lot of people this year. So you guys let me know how you guys are feeling about Ole Miss football going into the 2022 college football season. If you're listening to this on YouTube, leave a comment down in the comment section down below.